Hey, my name's Charlie King. I'm kind of a DIY guy, but I've never worked on a carburetor. I'm only marginally mechanically savvy. Been a motorcycle rider for a long time, and last year we bought a TTR 125 for my son and started puking fuel, and it wasn't idling correctly. So I decided that it's time to rebuild the carb. And after seeing that there really aren't a ton of videos about rebuilding carbs on the TTR 125, I decided to build my own. So come along and watch me as I learn my way through rebuilding a carb on a TTR 125. I've taken a look out there, and I feel like there's some good information out there, but I'd love to do something complete for folks like me who've never done it before and pull it apart and give it piece by piece for those of us who could really use it. So let's start with this is your carburetor. The first thing we're going to have to do is take the carburetor off. So you want to make sure that your fuel is turned off, and that's on the other side. I'll show that in a minute. But you've got 3 connections that you can see from this side that are going to be, or 5 connections actually, that are going to be critical. One of which is this bolt here, which requires a 14mm open-ended wrench. You want to pull this hose here. You're going to pull this hose here, which is the fuel overflow, and then you've got the the input and the output, or the air and the engine side. That gives you an idea of how technical I actually am. So you're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver to pull these 2 open-ended 14. Pull this hose and this, and then we'll take a look at the other side. So I'm going to try and give you a quick overview of removing your carburetor from the bike. To start with, you've got tubes on either side that need to be loosened and removed. You've got this, which is just pressure sensitive. It just slips on and slips off. You've got this bolt that is a 14mm that needs an open-ended wrench. You've got the throttle body, which is right up in here and is a threaded enclosure, which we're going to have to open. We're going to have to pull this hose off here. You've got on the other side, which you can't see, is you've got the fuel line to the fuel switch and one more pressure-oriented hose. So the first thing I'm going to do is, these hoses are held in with clamps that have Phillips screws on them. So you literally just loosen them and pop them off. This guy is a pressure-oriented, so you just pop him off as well. This guy up top is the same, just a pressure. So you just lift, just like that. And this guy here is going to be a wrench. Might be finger tight at this point. There we go. That one's pretty loose. I think it'll get a lot easier when I've released this side as well. Once I release this side, it should loosen up a ton, because I can then pull it out and bring the whole thing down. See? Now we're going to get a much better view of what we're looking at and better access. And this ta-da! And out it comes. And this is the threaded throttle body. And that just pops out. Now you do want to take note of the way it looks, especially if you're doing a carb rebuild, because this part is a replaceable part. On the back side, you've got the fuel line that goes to the fuel switch, which I've already removed. And then you've got this pressure-oriented one that just popped off that goes right there. One of the things you want to do on this bike, this metal tube on the back side is super long, and I was unable to get the hose off of here, and in pulling so hard on it, actually cracked this hose. And so I've had to trim the hose back, and it looks like I'm going to need to get a new hose, but we're not going to worry about that for now. We're going to go on inside and take this apart, get her cleaned out, and get our carburetor rebuilt. So as you can see here, we've got the fuel on-off switch, and we have a hose right here that we need to take the clamp off of to pull off this hose. Also got a secondary hose, it's hard to see here, that's connected just by pressure on the back, so you just pop that off. You want to make sure your fuel is in the off position before you start it. We've already removed the fuel line from the back side of the petcock here, and you're going to need to remove this hose as well, which is just put on with pressure. And you can see this fuel line goes right there. And be aware you might want a towel here because a little fuel might dribble out. But once you have all of those pieces taken off, we'll be ready to take the carb off. So now that we've gotten the carburetor off the bike, what I did was I opened up a paper bag from the grocery store as a surface to work on. I've got a couple of rags here. I got some paper towels. The tools you're going to need are a small flathead screwdriver, a fine flathead screwdriver for some of the smaller pieces, but not so small that they need the super small one, a standard flathead screwdriver, and a standard Phillips head screwdriver as well. These are about all the tools you're going to need, barring maybe a bottle brush and certainly some carb cleaner. The first thing we've done is we've pulled the carburetor off. Again, what you're noticing is this is the hose that goes to the fuel on-off switch. Do not try and remove the hose from this end of the carburetor. We all get to learn from our mistakes, and I did right here. I pulled on it to try and get it off. I even used a screwdriver to get it off, and in pulling, I split the hose. Right by the on-off switch. So in the end, I'm either going to have to replace this or at least cut it off and see if it's long enough to continue. You're going to have pulled off the fuel line and the other hose here. So those were where you go. First thing we want to do is the carburetor is basically in two halves, and there are 4 Phillips head screws that hold it together. So first thing we're going to do is take those off. And they each have a locking washer on them, which will generally stay on its own, so you don't need to worry about that. I would suggest making sure that you keep all your little parts together because there are a ton of little parts, whether you're just cleaning your carburetor or if you're doing a full carb rebuild. So, like I said, keeping all your parts together is always a good idea. Now, there is a gasket in here, and if your carb's been together for a long time or it's been exposed to a lot of heat, you don't want to crank it, but what you can do is you can either take a rubber handle, which some recommend, or you can take a plastic handle and lightly tap on the sides of the carb, and it should come apart. There we go. So now we have the two halves of the carb. Now just look at the lower half just for a sec here. What you'll notice is here's a gasket here, and you can see it's pretty worn. It's a pretty worn gasket. So that's going to certainly look forward to being replaced. Yeah, this one has been on since I'm working on an 02 TTR 125. So this probably has never been rebuilt. So let's take a look at the inside of the carb, which you'll notice here is your float. And again, apologies that I'm not going to have all the names for all the parts of this carburetor. I'm not a mechanic. First thing you do is you pull off this plastic piece, set it aside. You know, you can often start up at the top. If I remember correctly, this is the main throttle body. And this just unscrews. For cleaning these parts, carb cleaner is the way to go. If you're gonna just clean it, people jet through these. People scrub with bottle brushes. You can see that there are little holes in it, but you don't want to get anything metal in there because you don't want to open the holes up anymore. You don't want to damage any of the threads or anything like that. You can see there's a gasket on the neck here as well. You're going to take your smaller screwdriver and pull out this part right here, right next to it. Sometimes you have to turn them upside down. You can see this is a smaller version of the same thing. It's got the holes and everything. Next, we're gonna take out this screw. Now look, so I went to go put my standard screwdriver in there. Don't jam your screwdriver in if it doesn't fit. That's why I also brought this. It doesn't need to be long, but it's a thinner head so that I can just unscrew it this way. And then I can do the rest of it with my fingers. And then that comes out. Now there is a spring in here as well. So this is the part that came out right from here. And there's a spring in here as well. Do you see that it fell out in my hand? It's kind of important that we know where all those parts came from so we know where they go back to. I actually put the spring back on and then set it aside with the rest of my parts so I know that those two parts go together. Next piece is the float. You can see the float here. There is actually a pin, and my pin is awfully loose. See the pin that's coming out right here? I'm actually gonna pull the pin. You notice how the pin just falls right out. Don't know if that's actually normal that it comes out so easily, but so it has. And this just allows you to pull up the float. Now, truth be told, I've already used some carb cleaner on the inside of this, but pretty much any schmutz that you find in here, it's a technical term for dirt or grit. Any schmutz you find in here, you need to clean out with the carb cleaner, and even a little bit can cause your float to stick, which can cause, if you're running, finding a lot of fuel blowing out of the fuel overflow, that can be from a stuck float. So at least cleaning your carb is going to make a huge difference. Now the next part we're going to take out is this plate right here. Oop. Of course, the parts always go flying. That's why it's nice to have a piece of piece of paper or something you're working on. And the plate comes out just like that. Set those aside for the time being. Now, there is a plug here. This is not a screw, but a plug. If you pull it out, you can see how calcified the backside is. And I don't know if the camera picks this up, but that seal is pretty jammed up. And what you can't see is in the hole, it's pretty jammed up as well. So that's probably I'm gonna give it some work with a bottle brush, something and some carb cleaner, but not anything metal, because I don't want to scar the metal, which would then damage the seal. And when I first encountered it, it was super tight. It was super tight. You can see for orientation, that's the back side of that small fuel tube that we pulled off. And so what we're gonna do is remove that and bring that out like that. And there's not a spring in there, but you can see how calcified that is at the end. That's gonna make a big difference when we replace it. You can see that we're on the fuel on-off switch side because we still got the hose attached. And we've got that little standard head right behind there. We want to get at that. So we're going to start screwing that bad boy off. Over and over again, they say that no matter how much dirt, how little the dirt is, if you get dirt in your carb while you're trying to clean it, you may run into exactly the same problem or a new one or a brand new problem when you go to rebuild it. So you want to make sure your surfaces are clean and that your carb is clean. So just remove that little piece. It appears to my little eyeballs that there is a spring in here, but I'm not exactly sure. Let me take a look here. Oh yeah, here it is. So in that little hole was also this spring, which again, I'm gonna put right on the part that it came from so I know where it goes back, just like that. Next thing we're gonna do is there are two tiny screws, which are here and here, that we're gonna take out with our little screwdriver. just like this. There you go. That's what they look like. There's one, and here's number two. So as you can see, we're got a pretty heavy duty. This gasket has seen better days. Take a look at the inside. It's no longer flexible. It's hardened. It's super dry. So it probably has not been replaced in a long time. So we're going to go ahead and replace that today for sure. It's pretty clean underneath. You can certainly score this with steel wool, super fine steel wool, or I suppose you could use light sandpaper, but I think I'd go with a light steel wool because you don't want to grind down the metal at all. But that's a good place to start. I've got my Carb rebuild kit right here, which has got, you might recognize a ton of the parts in here. So part of what you can do is when you're taking this carburetor apart is to match it up with the pieces you're replacing it with. You may not be replacing it with all the parts that are here, because I have identified at least a number of parts that I can't identify where they came from in the Carb. So I'm wondering whether there are minor differences in the Carb from 2000 to 2005. As you can see, this one has got a TTR 125 00 to 05 Carb rebuild kit label on it. Always a suggestion for the men in the crowd, if you're deciding to do this and you want to do it indoors where it's warm, I would suggest waiting until your beautiful significant other has left for the day, because they may have some opinions about rebuilding a Carb inside your house. It's kind of stinky, and a little ventilation doesn't hurt anybody. And you just want to be aware that there's going to be a little leftover fuel. What you didn't see me do was pour out some fuel that was trapped in the bottom part of this Carb. It literally was maybe a half an ounce, but having some place to pour that into, whether it's a bowl or wipe it up with a paper towel or some sort of a rag, that's going to be important. Got the good idea of getting a couple of small mason jars to put the old parts in and the new parts in. So one container for the old parts, one container for the new parts, so I can, first of all, not mix them up, and second of all, just identify, keep everything in a very consistent and intentional place. So old parts, new parts. So one of the things that I actually couldn't find when I opened my carburetor, and maybe it just fell out, was the needle valve that connects to the float. And so I want to make sure that folks know where that is and how that fits. You'll notice it's got a little hanger in the top. I'm hoping you can see the little wire hanger. See the little wire hanger? And it actually connects up, got to get up underneath the back of the float here. And it will slide over this rectangular part so it hangs down. You can see how it hangs down there. And that's your counterweight for your float. And I want to share with you, I'm learning along the way as well. This is the jet. This is called the jet, the one with the little holes in the top that jet the fuel out. And so when people are putting in bigger jets, sometimes they do in these TTR 125s for better performance. I am not doing that. I'm just doing a stock replacement. So little information for you. I also pulled out the throttle body, which is this spring. It's the part that screws right in here into the top. And underneath it, you'll find a, let's see if I can put this together for you. You'll recognize this needle, which we got a replacement for. And it's got a washer and a slotted washer at the top, as well as this plastic retainer. Fits into this spring and plastic piece. They all seat right in the bottom there. So what it seems to be easiest to do, with this piece is to place it into the spring, hold it with your finger, and then put it in like that. And then your spring fits here. There's a cable that comes down from this is the throttle cable, and you'll see this slot in the side. The cable's got a stop in it, so you run the cable down the spring, and the cable, you pull the cable all the way through, and it gets in here into the stop. So the cable's on the inside of the spring, and when we get back to the bike, I'll show you how that goes. And this lines up a very specific way when you're putting the carb back into the bike. So I'm outdoors right now. We're gonna do a little bit of carb cleaning. And so there's some stuff you need to know about carb cleaning. First of all, carb cleaner is awesome. It's also super nasty for you. It's really bad stuff for you. It causes cancer in every known country in the Western world. It causes cancer, and it's bad for the environment. So carb cleaner is a necessary evil. So when you're using it, you want to be super careful. You want to have some sort of a container to catch the fluid in that you're spraying. You want to have protective gloves when you're using it. And you never want to spray it anywhere near your eyes or face, and try and keep it off your skin. And try not to, and always when you're spraying, spray in a ventilated area. So I'm going to go ahead and spray off our carb. So here we go. First things first, I'm going to put my gloves on. You can use any kind of latex or nitrile gloves are just fine. Eye protection is always a must, and any carb cleaner will do, and people have lots of different preferences for carb cleaners. And it's never a big long blast, but you just be aware that it will spray. It's usually under high pressure. You want to get it into all the little nooks and crannies to blow out the, ooh, look at all the parts coming out of there. That was awesome. And keep spraying in there until things clear up. No difference here. As I shared with you all, I've already actually done a little carb cleaning in here, so there won't be a ton of stuff, but when I first started, there was a boatload. Here we go. You can see little bits of gunk and schmutz that have come out from spraying this out. This is all pretty critical stuff to get cleaned out, because even the littlest bit can stick your float or mess with your performance. All right, I think we're pretty good. We're gonna get this dried off. Probably let it air dry for a little bit, let it drip off, and then we'll use some paper towels to clean it off. So I wanted to show you guys what I did here. I shifted everything down so I could show you that what I did was I lined up the existing parts I've taken off and all the old parts and matched them up with the new parts that I'm replacing them with, and discovered that I'm gonna have a couple of extra pieces left over, and discovering that I took a couple of pieces off that are not part of a carb rebuild kit. So this baffle, which we took off, that was underneath this plate, we were right when I noticed that it had blue Loctite on it. Blue Loctite means it is not designed to be taken off, so we're going to probably put some Loctite back on that and put it back in place nice and safely. And other than that, I think we're in pretty good shape and we're ready for a rebuild. So we're now at the point where it's time to put ourselves all back together. And instead of doing it laboriously, I'm going to do exactly what I'd recommend you do, which is as you take your carburetor apart, take photographs of each part as you take it out with your camera so you can look back at where it came from and how it goes back in. Because that's what I'm going to do as well, to make sure I get it put back the same way it came apart. It is the most likely way that this is going to be a win for putting our TTR 125 back in service. So next time I'll see you, we'll be putting it back on the bike. So here it is. Carburetor's all back in, ready to go. Let's see what happens. Put a little choke on it. Oh yeah. Harrison, let's go have some fun.